Worfully from the pulpit, the entire town fixed its attention on the woman in the third pew, as though her mere existence cast a shadow upon the church's walls. She remained motionless, her back erect, hands resting gently atop her tattered Bible. Her dress was modest, her hair pinned tight, yet none of it appeared to hold significance, not after the events that unfolded at the general store last week. Mr. Douglas extended his hand toward her waist, feigning an effort to remove lint from her skirt. With a swift motion, she struck him across the face, the impact so powerful that his spectacles flew from his grasp. Whispers circulated that the echo reached the stables, yet she offered no apology. What they claimed was the true transgression. Before the congregation stood Reverend Miles, his eyes ablaze beneath the stark white of his brows. In our midst, he declared with fervor, resides a spirit of defiance, a rebellious voice, a woman who dares to forget her place, who speaks when silence is expected, and who confronts propriety with each bold stride she takes. Not a single name was uttered, yet all were aware. Her gaze remained steadfast on the cross that loomed above the altar, her lips silent and still. Her whispers wound their way through the pews, sinuous and stealthy, reminiscent of serpents gliding through parched grass. Children gazed in wonder, wives pulled at their husbands' sleeves, and even the choir girls cast their eyes downward, fixated on their shoes. Her father, sitting next to her, remained silent, yet his jaw tightened, a coiled spring poised to unleash. Her mother, eyes shimmering with embarrassment, gazed down at her lap, twisting the edge of her handkerchief repeatedly between anxious fingers. She ought to have grown accustomed to it, the gazes, the stillness, the burden of scrutiny that clung to her like the heat of parched earth, yet was unlike anything else. This time it emanated from the very abode of the divine, and though her faith in their assertions had waned, the righteousness of it still pierced her heart. As the service drew to a close, silence enveloped her. Not a single soul approached. Not even the reverend extended a hand in greeting. Children were whisked away before they could reach her, while Mr. Douglas lingered in the doorway, nursing a bruised cheek and wearing a smirk that suggested he believed he had already triumphed. Outside, the town of Ash Hollow languished beneath a sky laden with the oppressive weight of late summer heat. The dust from wagons and boots clung to her shoes as she made her solitary way home, her family having departed without so much as a word. She was indifferent now, no longer affected. She favored the quiet, yet that evening, isolated in her chamber, the stillness seemed to take on a new character. It encroached from the edges. It stirred within her the echoes of what had slipped away, not merely her standing, but something far more profound. A ritual, a sense of belonging, a space to inhabit. With a single finger, she glided along the worn edge of her Bible, its leather supple from countless moments of devotion. She recalled a line her mother had softly spoken during her childhood, as tears streamed down her face over a scraped knee. Fortunate are those who endure persecution for the sake of righteousness. She found herself questioning whether righteousness played any role in the matter at hand. Yet she understood the weight of persecution, and weariness had settled deep within her. Weary of feeling excessive for some yet insufficient for others. Weary of the constant insistence that she required repair. Weary of the endless anticipation for another to recognize her in her entirety, just as she truly was. Unbeknownst to her, another had already taken action. Yet he remained silent, and silence would be his only companion. The door groaned open at the very moment she ascended the final step of the porch. Her father stood there, arms crossed, silhouetted by the dimming light within. His gaze traveled over her, from boots to bonnet, not laced with concern but imbued with a chilling detachment. He muttered, "Dinner's cold." "It's not as if you've earned it." She glided by him in silence. The atmosphere within the house was heavy with the scent of boiled cabbage and an undercurrent of scrutiny. Her younger brothers averted their gaze from her. Her mother sat by the stove, the rhythmic motion of her knitting punctuating the silence, her lips drawn into a tight line. The table lay in a state of partial disarray, the roast reduced to mere bone. One solitary plate lay untouched, distinguished from the others. As her hand extended toward it, her father's voice echoed, halting her in her tracks. "Your presence cast a shadow over that church today. Do you believe that people were oblivious?" I remained silent, and she responded softly, her tone calm and deliberate. "The issue at hand is quite evident. You ought to have risen and sought forgiveness, demonstrating a measure of humility. What is the purpose? For refusing to allow that man to lay his hands on me? His hand struck the edge of the table with force. The sharp clatter of silverware rang out, piercing the air like a gunshot. Your words flow endlessly, as they always have. That is the reason no respectable man has ever maintained his interest. That explains your presence here, at 29 and still without a spouse. I'd prefer solitude to servitude, she retorted, the words escaping her lips before she could rein them in. The ensuing silence was palpable, a violent stillness that halted her mother's knitting mid-stitch. One of the boys exhaled gently, as though bracing for an impending detonation. Her father advanced, and for a fleeting instant, she feared he might raise his hand against her. Instead, he leaned in, his voice a low, cutting whisper. You have transcended the confines of girlhood. You weigh heavily on my shoulders. Another outburst, another humiliation, and I will be left with no option but to send you away. Do you comprehend my words? She remained silent. With a quiet determination, she lifted the plate and made her way to the kitchen sink. Though the food was cold, she consumed it nonetheless, her gaze fixed on the window as the moon ascended gracefully above the treetops. On that night, slumber eluded her grasp. She reclined in bed, her gaze fixed on the ceiling, battling the urge to weep. His words no longer held the ability to hurt her. Their sting had faded into the past. Yet, from the deep-seated pain of understanding that no one in that house truly saw her anymore, her thoughts drifted to the other girls in town, modest, beaming, compliant, lauded for their quietude, revered for their tranquility. She could never be the type of woman who trailed 2 steps behind her husband, silenced in public, her voice never daring to rise. Perhaps that was her own doing. Perhaps the world was not designed for women who dared to occupy space. Beyond the glass, a shadow stirred. A figure looms, silent and imposing, lurking in the shade of the cottonwood tree by the boundary fence. She sat upright, her heart racing. He was present, the unknown figure, the individual known as half-breed Cole, a name uttered in whispers, laced with a blend of dread and disdain. He had come to Ash Hollow merely weeks prior, mounted on a black gelding, his silence a steadfast companion to his presence. There were those who asserted that he bore the blood of the Cheyenne within him. Some claimed it was even worse. Yet, what truly held significance was this. Not a single man would challenge him, and no woman would utter a word in his presence. And yet, there he stood just outside her window, shrouded in darkness, observing, not menacing, staying still, merely existing in the moment. She remained silent. She remained still as well. They lingered in that expanse of quietude, 2 souls teetering on the brink of their existence, each bearing the weight of unchangeable burdens. Then, just as abruptly as he had materialized, he vanished, engulfed by the embrace of the trees. She reclined once more, her pulse racing still. Yet now the pain in her heart had transformed. After what felt like an eternity, a sense of companionship began to blossom within her. In Ash Hollow, whispers darted through the air with remarkable speed, particularly when they were nourished by fear. By Monday morning, the name Cole had danced on the lips of every resident in town. Whispers circulated that he was the offspring of a white officer, a man who met his end inebriated during a border clash. Some claimed he hailed from the Black Hills, nurtured by wolves and guided by spirits. Yet, they found common ground on 2 matters. With Cheyenne blood coursing through his veins, he exuded an unmistakable aura of danger. He resided outside the town's borders. He never took a room for rent. I have never partaken in the libations offered at the saloon. He never secured his horse at the church's hitching post. He chose to set up camp just beyond the cottonwoods, where the river took a sharp turn and the land sank into a low, shadowy embrace. They referred to it as No Man's Hollow. At that moment, it became his emptiness. On that particular morning, she caught sight of him once more. She ventured down the back trail leading to Miller's Creek, flanked by thorny blackberry brambles and the faint traces of rabbit tracks, seeking to evade both the prying eyes of the townsfolk and the wrath of her father. The basket draped over her arm contained only a book and an apple. Yet even that seemed to weigh heavily upon me. A solitary woman, they would remark. Once more, the trail constricted as it approached the ancient stone bridge. There he remained, motionless like the surrounding trees, Raindrops slipping through his fingers, the horse beneath him serene and composed. His coat bore the marks of time, his boots encrusted with red dust, while his expression remained inscrutable. Yet his gaze, those deep, unwavering eyes, locked onto hers. She came to a halt. He remained still. A crow cawed from above, its wings beating the air as it swooped low, startling her horse. With an instinctive grace, she steadied it, her fingers gently caressing the animal's neck. As she raised her gaze once more, she found him nearer, not threatening, merely there. "Morning," she said, her voice emerging softer than she had hoped. He remained silent. She lingered in anticipation. No alterations occurred. Heat surged in her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from a fierce sense of defiance. What made silence seem like a form of judgment? What led everyone to believe she required mending? And now, even this unfamiliar figure remained silent. "I know what they say about you," she muttered, mostly to herself. "It's the same sort of remarks they make about me." His gaze remained unyielding, yet an unseen change stirred within him. Neither his mouth nor his hands, only the space that lingered between them. Somewhat more buoyant. A slight burden had been eased, if only for a moment. In that moment, he took an unexpected turn. He moved to the side. Silence reigns, devoid of expression, simply an expanse, bestowed without expectation. As she moved past him with deliberate slowness, her heart raced, and she summoned the courage to steal a glance back over her shoulder. He had already averted his gaze, gracefully ascending onto his horse in a fluid, hushed movement. He galloped away, retreating toward the trees, heading back to the hollow. That evening, at the supper table, her father muttered something about half-blood filth lurking near the eye. In Greek, her mother uttered the grace, her fingers trembling slightly, while her brothers shared a chuckle over a joke that held no interest for her. She remained silent. It transcends the bridge. It delves deeper than the gaze. It was not about how, after so many years, someone had finally looked at her and found no trace of shame. Merely an individual. Later, she settled onto the porch, a basket resting beside her, the book lying untouched across her lap. One by one, the stars above flickered into existence, while the wind softly murmured across the vast plains. She attuned her senses to the sound of hooves, the rhythm of breath, the subtle rustle of a figure concealed among the trees. Yet he remained absent. Not on that particular night. Yet she lingered a bit more, for she was beginning to understand that silence could convey more than 1,000 words. The wind carried a flavor that evening, reminiscent of copper and the essence of storm water. The wind wailed through the crevices of the farmhouse, shaking the shutters and playfully tugging at the curtains. A wind that stirred unease in the creatures of the wild and drew children closer to their mother's comforting embrace. She sensed it before the crackle reached her ears. Profound and resonant, akin to the sound of bones fracturing beneath the weight of the earth. Suddenly a piercing scream shattered the silence. Not of human origin. The steed. She sprang to life before her feet even touched the ground, breath sharp and urgent in her lungs. Beyond her window, a crimson hue adorned the horizon, far too radiant to be mere moonlight. Smoke coiled upward, reminiscent of a serpent, while beyond the fields flames danced against the darkness of the night. She shouted, bursting through the front door, "The barn!" Her brothers lagged behind, still in the midst of getting dressed. Her father shouted commands while descending the porch, shotgun clutched tightly. Yet it was not a thief that posed a danger to them. The barn loomed high, yet the flames had already consumed its roof. The parched hay flared up like a spark, transforming the entire edifice into a blazing inferno. The creatures within cried out, filled with fear, ensnared. She acted without thought, without inquiry. She dashed headlong into the swirling smoke. Within, a tempest reigned. Timber creaked and sparks danced through the air. The cows thrashed restlessly in their stalls, while the horses kicked furiously at their gates. She unlatched every door within her grasp, coughing, her eyes aflame, the heat searing her skin. A sudden crash echoed from behind her. She whirled with dizzying speed. A beam struck her side, stealing the breath from her lungs. The smoke enveloped her, and she faltered, collapsed, and crawled onward. And then, powerful, unadorned arms, drawing her through flames as if she were weightless. The frigid night struck her skin with the force of a sharp reprimand. She inhaled sharply, pulling the air deep into her lungs. Above her, the stars flickered once more, piercing and unfeeling. Silence enveloped him. He gently placed her upon the grass, examined her eyes, and then rose to his feet. His hair clung to his forehead, drenched in sweat. Ash brushed the ash from his shoulders. His gaze held for a fleeting moment, just long enough. Then he disappeared into the embrace of the trees. When her father finally arrived, panting and flushed, the barn stood as mere remnants of its former self. "You foolish girl," he shouted. It was a perilous situation, one that could have cost you your life. She attempted to utter a sound, yet the smoke had stolen her voice away. "And who on earth dragged you out? Is one of your companions from the woods?" She remained silent. There was no necessity for her to do so. He was aware. Moreover, he loathed the very act of knowing. By dawn, the entire town was abuzz with the news, the blaze, the salvation, the quiet figure. They did not express your gratitude to him. They failed to inquire about her well-being. They merely murmured. What could possibly have drawn him close to their territory? What could possibly draw her to the barn in solitude? Do you believe she reached out to him? She no longer makes an effort to conceal it. That day, her father forbade her from leaving the house. He strode back and forth on the porch, rifle clutched tightly, as though challenging Cole to make his reappearance. Her mother's prayers rose in volume, saturating the stillness with verses and a heavy sense of reproach. Yet she lingered by the window, her fingers encircling a cup of lukewarm tea, lost in the memory of the heaviness of those arms, the unwavering calmness, the manner in which he neither inquired nor reprimanded nor faltered. He had glimpsed her amidst the flames and drawn her back into the realm of the living, not due to her being a lady, but rather because she was a human being. That evening, she ignited a solitary candle and set it upon the windowsill, a quiet expression of gratitude, a gesture, a gift. She was uncertain whether he would notice it. Yet, nestled within her very bones, she sensed that he had indeed crossed that threshold. The scar on her side healed gradually, a delicate thread she sensed brushing against her skin with each subtle shift of her body. Yet, it was not the sole impression that lingered. In Ash Hollow, she had always been the subject of scrutiny, with eyes assessing her posture, her tone, her every step. Yet now, in the aftermath of the fire, their expressions had transformed. Their amusement had faded, replaced by a keen edge of suspicion. 3 days later, she entered the general store, in search of flour and bandages. The familiar chime of the bell above the door echoed through the space, yet an unsettling silence greeted her instead. Mr. Douglas, his face flushed and a cigar clenched between his teeth, failed to lift his gaze. In quietude, she collected her belongings. As she approached the counter, he allowed her to linger in anticipation. At last, he inquired, avoiding any gaze, "Do you come bearing gold or merely chaos today?" She placed 2 silver coins upon the wooden surface, free of troubles. "It has always been that way." He let out a derisive snort, processed her items with a mechanical efficiency, and offered no further words. The stairs resumed their ascent into the open air. A woman, navigating the bustling street, clutched her child's hand with a firmer grip. 2 boys jostled one another, stifling their laughter behind their hands. The sheriff stood on his porch, arms folded, silent as ever, observing the world around him. Yet, in this moment, the silence bore a heavier weight, suggesting that her transgressions had transcended mere impropriety. It had transformed into something entirely different, corrupted. Upon my return, she was already home. Her father stood by the gate, arms crossed, boots firmly anchored in the earth. "You went to town," he stated, his voice devoid of inflection. "Supplies were essential for my needs. Resources hold no value compared to your essence." She inclined her head. "What constitutes my essence? Valuable to you in these times, father? Fewer than a sack of flour?" He moved in, his voice a gravelly whisper. "Do not attempt to outsmart me. That brute has left its mark on you." She recoiled, not from the insult itself, but from the effortless way it slipped from his lips. "He rescued me from the brink. Perhaps you ought to have allowed one of your brothers to take care of it, or passed away with a sense of dignity." The words lingered in the air, taut and suffocating. Without a word, she brushed by him, her jaw tight, the thrum of her heartbeat echoing in her ears. Once more the flames danced in her dreams that night. Yet, on this occasion, she remained unscathed. She strode through the flames, her bare feet unyielding against the heat, while the others cried out from the periphery. Fear held her back from following. while pride kept her from inquiring about her ability to do so. At the journey's conclusion, there stood Cole, illuminated by the swirling smoke and remnants of ash. He remained still, silent, yet he grasped something within his hands. It is not a weapon, a blossom. As she stirred from her slumber, the sun had just begun its ascent, casting a gentle glow across the horizon. Outside her window, mist curled low across the fields, resembling a gentle exhalation. There, on the window sill, resting just below the spot where she had set her candle days ago, Ego, a delicate plume. Extended and dark-tipped, it lay upon the wood as if it had been placed there with utmost care. With fingers that trembled, she lifted it delicately. He had been here. Silence reigned, with neither footprints nor a knock to disrupt the stillness at the door. Only the feather. A note, perhaps. Perhaps it could be framed as an inquiry. Would she? Should one pursue the flickering flame or remain in the comforting embrace of safety? In the waning hours of the afternoon, she made her way to the ancient chapel perched at the town's periphery. Once forsaken, the roof droops sadly, while weeds weave their way through the pews. Yet it remained serene, unspoiled. At last she found a moment to breathe freely, unburdened by the weight of watchful gazes. She perched in the front row, her hands intertwined, not through prayer, but in bold resistance to despair. She had grown weary of the constant gaze upon her, weary of being labeled yet never truly understood. And amidst the trees there existed a man who never urged her to transform. I refrained from asking her anything whatsoever. Within the chapel's embrace she found solace. Every morning, just as the sun began to rise, she strolled there with a basket filled with bread or apples, a gesture made to break the stillness. With every discovery, she unearthed remnants of the past. A pine cone intricately etched with enigmatic designs, a delicate arrangement of beads bound together with rawhide, and there lay a smooth stone, its surface adorned with a flawless circle etched into it. He was never seen. Yet his presence lingered, akin to the stillness that envelops the air just before a storm breaks. On a particular morning he appeared. As she stepped into the clearing, her eyes fell upon him, perched upon the stone wall that once bordered the chapel's garden. His elbows lay gently upon his knees. His hat sat low, casting shadows over his face. As motionless as the effigy of an overlooked holy figure, she stood still, caught in a moment of disbelief. He remained still. A gentle breeze wove its way between them, ruffling the wildflowers at her feet. "Did you happen to leave these behind?" she inquired gently, raising the strand of beads from her basket. He raised his gaze, locked gaze with her, and gave a subtle nod. At one point, it was the inaugural moment she beheld his visage unmasked by shadow. Prominent cheekbones, robust jawline. A scar traced his brow, slender and faint, reminiscent of an unfinished tale that lingered in the shadows, waiting for a voice to bring it to life. His gaze was devoid of any ill intent, merely understanding. She advanced, setting down the basket with care, adjacent to him on the wall. Then, unbidden, she took a seat beside it, creating a slight gap between them, yet not excessively so. "You don't speak," she remarked. "Yet, you pay attention." He remained still, offering no nod of acknowledgement. Not a single blink. I observed her, serene and still. Her smile was but a whisper of light. Such a rarity. For a time, they lingered in quietude. The leaves of the cottonwood rustled softly overhead. A distant hawk called from somewhere far away. She allowed the silence to linger, unburdened by the need for words. She had devoted her existence to the art of self-explanation, expressing regret for her intensity, her assertiveness, her fury. In this place, all of that held no significance. At last, he delved into his coat, retrieving an item from the depths of the inner pocket. A modest fabric parcel. With deliberate care, he peeled back the layers, unveiling a solitary item. A pristine white feather, delicate and gentle, tied at its base with a vivid red thread. He extended it toward her. Her gaze lingered on it before shifting to him. "What is the significance of this?" He inclined his head, pondering her presence. At last, his lips parted. "Not a great deal, quiet. Yet, that is sufficient. Tranquility." The word hit her with the force of a thunderbolt. With fingers that trembled, she grasped the feather. Fearful of inhaling, tranquility devoid of allure, neither submission nor stillness. Tranquility. No one had ever extended such a gesture to her before. She gazed at him once more, probing his features for an elusive something that remained just out of reach. "Why me?" she inquired. He remained silent. He merely stood, tipped his hat, and strolled away. The trees stand tall and silent, guardians of the earth, their branches reaching out like arms in a timeless embrace. There is no farewell. There is no commitment. Merely that familiar hushed essence slipping away into the embrace of the woods. She lingered in that spot long after he had vanished from sight. She held the feather tightly in her palm. For the very first time she embraced her true self without a hint of shame. She felt selected, neither by coincidence nor by compassion, yet by an individual who perceived her in her entirety and chose to remain regardless. She endeavored to conceal the feather, not due to any sense of shame, but rather the complete contrary. Yet, she was aware of the fire it would ignite. Since the fire her father had taken to observing her with a heightened intensity, her brothers had begun to murmur, believing she was oblivious to their hushed tones. They sensed a shift in the air, and they found it unappealing. On that morning she slipped out of the house with a familiar silence, as was her custom. It was merely a stroll, she had remarked once, to breathe in the fresh air. Yet, on this occasion, she found herself unable to cross even the boundary of the fence. Her father advanced, emerging from the shed, a shotgun draped casually over one shoulder, with eyes that were both icy and inscrutable. "Where do you continually find yourself heading?" he inquired, not as if it were a question, but rather as if it were a snare. "Nowhere," she replied, freshly released. He advanced, his voice dropping to a hushed tone. "Do you really believe I'm oblivious to what's being said? I fail to perceive how you return, radiant as a girl in pursuit of her wildest dreams." She maintained his gaze. "I am not pursuing anyone. He is in your company." She remained silent. He chuckled, yet the sound held no trace of amusement. "Your reputation is already tarnished. Do you truly wish to embark on a journey that could tarnish your very essence?" "My soul is mine," she whispered gently, "and it remains intact." In that moment, he struck her. Not a mere slap, a swing delivered with a subtle intent, crafted to impart a lesson. She faltered, regained her balance, and stood tall. The metallic flavor of blood lingered in her mouth, reminiscent of rust. He lifted the gun, not with the intent to fire, but to direct, as if she were ready for the challenge. A creature to be expelled. "You no longer reside beneath my roof," he declared. "Gather your transgressions in your quietude, and depart." Her mother lingered in the doorway, eyes glistening with unshed tears, yet her lips remained sealed. Her brothers remained at the table, feigning indifference to the unfolding scene. He faced no obstacles. Silence enveloped her, as if the world had conspired to leave her unheard. She made her way to her room, gathering the few belongings she possessed: a solitary change of clothes, a tattered Bible, and the ethereal white feather. She nestled it within the spine, amidst the Psalms and Proverbs. By noon she found herself traversing the road in solitude, her boots stirring up clouds of dust, her body protesting with each weary step. Not a single soul in town extended an offer for a ride. No one met her gaze. She made her way to the brink of Ash Hollow, where the river wound gracefully and the landscape fell into a serene hush. Her feet danced with an instinctual grace. Her heart pursued a profound truth, one she had ceased to doubt. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she arrived at the chapel. Yet she refrained from stepping inside. Instead, she ventured past it, into the cottonwoods, tracing the path shaped by hooves and footsteps that remained unspoken. By touch, she discovered the hollow, and there, partially obscured by the twilight, stood a quaint cabin crafted from timber and stone. From the chimney, tendrils of smoke ascended into the sky. A horse lingered in the vicinity, its reins hanging slack. She lingered at the precipice of the eye-gank, clearing, filled with doubt. At that moment, the door swung open, revealing him standing there. He appeared unfazed. He made no inquiry into the reason for her arrival. He gracefully moved aside, a beckoning, a refuge, a silent promise. She stepped ahead, crossing the boundary of all she had ever understood, into a realm that demanded nothing from her but her very being. Free from judgment, devoid of shame, simply a state of tranquility. Yet, he remained silent. Yet within that stillness, she perceived all that was essential. The town claimed she had disappeared. There were murmurs that she had fled, cloaked in disgrace. Perhaps to the mining camps where her name was but a whisper lost in the wind. Whispers circulated that she had been abducted, whisked away by the half-breed outlaw, destined to vanish from sight forever. The bruises on her arm went unspoken, a silent testament to untold stories. Her name was never uttered within the walls of the church. In the farmhouse, her mother maintained a closed door to her bedroom, diligently dusting the surfaces within, as if a tomb lay hidden, unacknowledged by all. Her father never mentioned her again, save for a solitary instance when he remarked that she had made her choice. Yet, nestled within the heart of the forest, past the boundaries of cartography and where pathways faded into the prints of wandering deer, she was rediscovering the art of breathing. The cabin, though modest in size, exuded a sense of sturdiness. 2 chairs, a solitary bed, a diminutive stove. He chose to sleep outside most nights. She was aware, for she would observe him through the small pane of glass, his silhouette curled by the flickering flames, a knife gripped tightly in his hand, carving softly into the wood as if it concealed mysteries meant solely for his understanding. He never attempted to reach for her. She never stepped into the cabin unless she was invited. She lingered in anticipation. In a fleeting moment of vulnerability, a glimmer flickered in his gaze. A faint glimmer of desire or yearning did not arrive. Rather, there were gestures. A solitary cup of water rests upon the table. The blanket brushed free of leaves with each dawn's light. A snare trap was reset for rabbits, ensuring she wouldn't face hunger. On a night when the wind howled fiercely and chilled the air, she ventured outside to discover him positioned against the tree line, arms crossed and jaw set in determination. She approached him with a deliberate slowness, enveloped in the warmth of her shawl. "You needn't spend the night out here," she remarked. He raised his gaze, uttered not a word. Yet, as she began to walk away, he trailed behind her. He sat by the stove, a quiet observer, as she busily arranged the kindling. In quietude, they partook of the stew. He skillfully carved as she delicately mended a tear in her dress. The flames crackled gently in the space that separated them. As the hours slipped away, she finally succumbed to fatigue, collapsing onto her bed after a grueling day spent collecting wood and pounding laundry against the unforgiving stones. In that moment, she chose not to invite him to remain by her side. He just did. He positioned himself beside her bed, one hand gently placed over his heart. The other was the carved feather he bore as if it were a sacred talisman. She observed him with half-closed eyes, her breath gradually slowing, her limbs enveloped in warmth. There existed neither proposal nor promise, no utterance to be found, only the weight of presence, the quiet strength of trust. And in some inexplicable way, it held more weight than any promise uttered before a sacred altar. As dawn broke, the light seeped through the crevices in the roof, casting a golden hue over the cabin. She awoke to discover him already outside, tending to the fire and boiling water. A fresh dawn unfolding as every existence ought to, through gentle acts of goodwill and a heart unburdened by fear. In due course, she assisted him in hoisting stones to fortify the garden wall. They toiled together, exchanging few words, their breaths synchronized in a quiet harmony. As a hawk soared above, its call echoing with a sense of solitude, she lifted her gaze and smiled. "I once found myself—" She mentioned that she believed love had to be earned, her words hanging in the air, not truly anticipating a response. Embrace a gentler presence, a whisper of existence, a subtle form. He hesitated for a moment, then, without looking back, uttered a mere 3 words. "You never accomplished that." The breath lodged within her throat. She held back her tears, not in that moment. Yet, as the night deepened and he succumbed to slumber on the floor once more, she gently brushed the edge of the blanket draped over him and murmured softly into the shadows, "I appreciate you bringing me along." Yet, despite his stillness, a soft sigh slipped from his chest. Steady and calm, the breath of a man who required no words to grasp the gifts exchanged, both received and offered in return. Her return to town for the first time was a necessity dictated by the harshness of winter. Salt, flour, and oil were essential ingredients they required. The traps lay barren, their emptiness stretching across countless days, while the creek had succumbed to a frost too thin to yield any fish. She extended her willingness to go. He remained silent. He quietly offered her a pouch filled with coins, their silver surfaces dulled by time, alongside a handful of flattened bullets, now transformed into smooth discs, and gave a subtle nod. The town remained untouched by time. The familiar dusty streets stretch out before me, the crooked signs leaning as they always have, and the same faces linger in their usual spots. In doorways where eyes pierce like needles. Yet she chose not to don the somber hues of morning black or a dress that conformed to expectation. She donned a simple coat, a shawl draped gracefully over her shoulders, and her hair was intricately braided down her back. Her boots bore the marks of the earth, caked in mud. Her hands bore the marks of hard work, yet her spine stood tall and unyielding. She walked by Mr. Douglas's store. He raised his gaze, blinked slowly, and remained silent. The room was enveloped in silence. A woman let a spool of thread slip from her grasp. Someone murmured her name as if it left a bitter aftertaste. She turned a blind eye to them all. She acquired her necessities, settled the bill entirely, and departed. As she made her way out, she halted by the church steps, where Reverend Miles engaged in conversation with two elderly gentlemen. He pivoted at the echo of her boots. In that fleeting instant, stillness enveloped the scene, and not a soul stirred. He then cleared his throat. "Please feel free to enter. Our worries have been mounting." Her gaze drifted beyond him, resting on the stained glass window, where a lamb gazed back, eternally pure, eternally silent. "No need," she remarked. "In the solitude of the woods, I have felt the presence of the divine guiding me with unwavering support." With that, she continued on her way. On the outskirts of town, he stood waiting, not mounted on a horse, but grounded on foot. He lingered at the boundary of the trees, arms folded, observing her with an enigmatic calmness that never wavered. She approached him, her bag laden with provisions. He accepted it without hesitation. Silence enveloped them on the journey back, yet an undeniable change lingered in the air. That evening, beneath the soft glow of the moon, he carefully wrapped a strip of rawhide around her wrist. There is no ring, there is no altar. There were no witnesses. Two hands converge in the stillness of the night. She refrained from inquiring about its significance. There was no necessity for her to do so. As dawn broke, they sipped coffee by the flickering firelight, their hands working in unison to repair the roof above them. As a stranger rode by the fringes of the woods in search of a lost cow, they remained unhidden. They lingered together in the expanse, the man tipping his hat before continuing on his way. As spring approached, whispers began to circulate. "She resides with him. Upon her wrist she adorns a Cheyenne charm. They chose not to marry. There is no obligation for them to do so. It was her choice. She desired it." None of it held significance, for beyond where the cottonwoods murmured and the wildflowers flourished unbidden, a fresh existence was taking root, leisurely, resolute, and undisturbed by the clamor of humanity. Each morning as she awoke to the scent of pine woven into her hair and the sight of his carved feathers gracing the door, the whispers of the town faded from her mind. Her mind lingered on the unspoken truth, that she was home. Time flowed gently, reminiscent of water gliding over smooth stones. She never came back to reside in Khartoum. Yet on occasion when the weather favored them and their provisions dwindled, she strolled through Ash Hollow with her chin held high and her boots caked in dust. What was once a scandal has transformed into a narrative that simply won't fade away. The murmurs dwindled as the years passed, supplanted by fresh tales and unforeseen calamities. Yet from time to time, an inquisitive spirit would pause her journey. "Do you long for it?" they would inquire. "Life as it should be. Is it truly a house, a sanctuary adorned with rows of pews?" She would smile and declare, "I possess all that I have ever wished for." Simply not in that manner. It was anticipated. Deep within the woods, the cabin expanded. He constructed a lean-to for the purpose of storing herbs. She sowed wildflowers by the porch. As spring unfurled its vibrant tapestry, birds found refuge in the eaves, crafting their nests with care. In winter, smoke spiraled gently from the chimney, reminiscent of a melody. They chose a life without children. Yet they found solace in their tranquility, and that sufficed. One crisp autumn day, a young boy wandered away and found himself lost by the gentle flow of the creek. His cries echoed through the trees, frail and filled with fear. She discovered him amidst the stones, drenched in mud and trembling with cold. She bore him back herself. The villagers observed her as she drew near. The child nestled against her, his cheek resting softly on her shoulder. Silence enveloped them. Initially, not at all. Yet one person brought forth a blanket, while another extended a loaf of bread. As the boy's mother embraced him, tears of gratitude streaming down her face, she offered a silent nod before turning to depart. A young girl, scarcely 7 years old, pulled at her skirts, eager to be on her way. "Are you the enchantress from the forest?" the girl inquired. She knelt down, gazing into the child's wide eyes, and offered a warm smile. "No, my dear," she replied softly. "A woman who ceased the act of pretense." The girl blinked, then gave a solemn nod, as though that were entirely logical. At the cabin, Cole sat patiently, cradling carved bowls of stew and a half-finished flute resting in his lap. He refrained from inquiring. He never did. He cast his gaze upon her hands, still glistening with moisture from cradling the child, and offered a single nod. That evening, as they gathered around the flickering flames, she observed him from a distance, his expression serene, eyes shut tight, attuned to the whispers of the wind weaving through the branches. She reflected on the person she once was. The girl faced ridicule for her boisterous laughter, a woman silenced for her voice, a daughter left unacknowledged. And now, here she stood, unwed in the eyes of the church, unwashed in the perceptions of many. Yet, in their entirety, undeniably complete, they found themselves without a single wedding photo. There were no names etched into the family Bible, yet the porch welcomed wildflowers swaying gently in the breeze. A delicately carved feather adorned the door, and the silence enveloped them, never once feeling hollow. Years later, after the war had ebbed and flowed, and the world became increasingly cacophonous with the clatter of trains, the buzz of telegrams, and fresh manifestations of cruelty, a letter was penned to the county archive inquiring about the fate of the woman who had eloped with the Cheyenne. The response was brief. "She resides in the forest," it conveyed, "alongside a man who never uttered her disgrace into the open air." And that, perhaps, is the most joyful conclusion we could hope for. At times, the world demands that we shrink ourselves, merely to find acceptance. Yet, true peace is not derived from the desire to satisfy others. It emerges from the profound experience of being recognized and cherished for our authentic selves. If this narrative resonated with you in any way, please share a comment, even if it's just a few words, to let someone else know they are not alone. If you think that more tales like this are worthy of being shared, be sure to subscribe to the channel. We'll be here, eagerly awaiting your return, in a hush that resonates more profoundly than any utterance.